Hello everyone, it's Micah. I am back. I am fully back. I am through complaining and I'm about to, have already rolled up my sleeves and I'm ready to get back into this learning thing. It was a tough and interesting day back because I was off work today, so I felt like I had this opportunity to do so much work and cover so much ground. But also at the same time, I have been, on a bit of a vacation, an unplanned vacation from doing this work that I've committed that I have committed to do for the past couple of weeks. It's not really an auspicious way to start things off, but in the beginning, I think I expected that things could be a little rough. But I'm back. That's the point. I didn't get nearly as much stuff done as I wanted to do today, especially given the fact that it was a day off. In fact, I did just about as much as I would have done on a regular work day, inclusive of distractions that would come up as part of my work day. But I am sort of back on track. I started with my fourth audiobook in the podcast series that I'm listening to, and that's probably the most interesting thing I have to relay, and I'll get back to that in a little bit. But I also tuned back into my discography of The Dream and listened to an album, a very long album, from him from 2013, and then the two EPs that he released in 2015 and 2016, I think. So now I'm kind of on the home stretch. I think I may be able to finish off the rest of his discography tomorrow. And the last thing that I did, which I did some cleaning and straightening around this place here, which was, that's part of what I was alluding to yesterday when I did my From the Couch session over there, or is that what I said? Yeah, From the Couch. I forgot what I called it, but that was part of what I was talking about then. I feel like I need to get my physical environs properly situated before I can really dig in and do this other work that I need to do. So it's a bit of a split focus. I went into this project at the beginning of December thinking, okay, this is all about academic conceptual stuff, but what I'm coming to understand is that when you've got all these things around you that are out of order, even if it seems trivial, just knowing that you have these other things in place and clean and organized, or that you're making an effort in that direction, it makes you more focused when you need to do the work that you really want to do and that you find more meaningful. So I did some of that work today. The big distraction that came today was when I decided to take a bit of a detour. I was going through my files on my computer and I came upon my CPE tracker for my CPA, which I earned I guess it's been about 10 years since I earned my CPA, and we're getting close to the year-end deadline, so I wanted to make sure I was on track with that. And I knew I had some ground to make up, but I basically dug in and filled out that tracker to see how much I needed to do, and then I said, you know what, let me just go for it. So I really dug in and got a lot of CPE self-study work done this afternoon, and I feel excellent about having done that. It took some time, it took a few hours, but I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish, and I've taken really great strides towards having my requirements met for the year. Something I've been putting off and something I just sat down and took care of. So I feel very good about doing that. And at the same time, that's while I was working on that, I was listening to the audiobook part of the time, and I was listening to The Dream part of the time. So part of what I want to do is not just regurgitate the things that I'm doing, making lists on here, but actually to synthesize some of the things I'm gathering from what I'm doing. But I know it's baby steps. So in the beginning, it is going to seem a little bit like rote recitations of what I did today. And I hope to get more polish, and I hope to get more meaning into these videos as time goes on. Right now, I'm just holding on for dear life to get the work in, get the studying in, put my eyes on and my ears on these things so that I can start making the progress instead of getting stuck in first gear, trying to analyze the absolute crap out of 2 lines of text and then giving up. I think that's been my stumbling block my entire life, is that I get hyper focused on 1 or 2 things and I give up, or I stall because I'm trying to make sure I breathe in and understand every single piece of the thing that I'm studying, and I end up getting lost, in the forest, looking at all the individual trees. I guess that's sort of kind of in the ballpark of that metaphor. But I do feel like churning through some of this stuff without necessarily wringing my hands over whether I caught every nuance of what was being said. That's something that I'm really trying to work through, sort of the equivalent of speed reading. But again, I want to head in that direction of synthesizing things. So first, and probably the easier thing to evaluate would be the 3 records that I listened to from The Dream, because they weren't really big departures from his earlier work, and they weren't huge steps forward. I don't feel like there's a big conceptual thing going on with any of these 3 albums. I think the 1977 album, which I listened to back the last time that I was plugged in and listening to him, was more of a thinking album where I really wanted to go back and dig into it and understand how the different subjects of all the songs related to each other. But on these 3 records, I didn't get the impression that there was any sort of deeper meaning going on. The songs were pretty straightforward about what they were about. There was a lot of songs about sex. There were a lot of songs about sticky love situations. And honestly, I was studying, and so I wasn't totally tuned into the lyrical content. I really just wanted to get sort of the audio. I wanted to let the sounds wash over me. But one thing that I did pick up on is that, especially on some of his records during the mid-2010s, and maybe this is a back and forth, like being the influencer and being influenced back by the whole emo rap, moody R&B kind of vibe, the whole Weeknd, Drake kind of atmospherics. I feel like that milieu of music owes a lot to the moodiness and the deep dish sort of interest and somewhat introspective vibes that Dream was putting out there in the mid to late 2000s and the aughts, when a lot of people were gravitating more toward party music. His music was plenty party friendly as well, but there were a number of times that he really dipped into sort of the emo bucketing and got into his feelings with these songs, and you really went through it with him as he was talking about the things he was talking about in his music. And so then, we're talking about going on 10 years later, you can see that sort of regurgitated back to us again through the processor of it becoming mainstream to relate to audiences in that way. And so I did notice a similarity, and whether it was a throwback to the chicken and egg question, basically. Did the Weeknd get a lot of his stuff from the Dream? Uh, do they have common influences? Is it just this give and take where they're listening to each other and other artists as well, or is it just that we grab too quickly onto musical categories, and that music by nature has always been emotional, and people have always been heartbroken or distraught or introspective in their music. It's just when you slap a label on it, suddenly you see it everywhere, because calling music emo is almost like calling music. It's really part of what it is. It's about having an emotional experience of some sort. If you listen to music to not feel anything, then I would have to question what it is you were doing, So but that was one thing I noticed. And the other thing I noticed before I move on is that there was one song in particular, and I think it applies to any number of the Dream songs, but and maybe the part, the Dream, the Weeknd, did the Weeknd get his idea for having that as his name from the Dream? I don't know. But there was one song in particular, and I'm looking for it right now. I can't find it. I think maybe it was on the album that I listened to. I really want to get the right song because I made note of it at the time. Yeah, I think it was the song Divine, which was I believe was a bonus track on the deluxe version of Foreplay, IV for Foreplay, from that album from 2013. It really, to me, sounded like an easy sort of Sade kind of vibe, easy yet emotional, Sade type of vibe. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great if Sade and The Dream did a collaboration? He produced one of the group's songs, or he got Helen, because this is one of those bits of trivia that not everybody necessarily knows, but Sade is actually the band, and the lead singer comes from the lead singer whose first name is actually Helen, and she has three names, but I can't remember. It starts with an A, her last name, but Sade is part of her name. But if he just got her, or he collaborated with the band, I thought that would be a very interesting combination. Their very live, instrumental, jazzy vibe combined with his studio wizardry and his highly knobs and bells and whistles kind of approach, mad scientist kind of approach to music. It seems like it would be a great mashup of those two worlds, but also the sounds would be very, very compatible with each other. So that's something else that I thought about. I was a lot less enthusiastic about my audiobook, and what I'm doing once again is I'm going back in Audible, where there's a podcast that is called Classic Audiobook Collection, and there are like 1,100 of these things. So I'm on a hopeless mission to just chug through and listen to these one at a time. So I'm just going through them in order. And that's sort of a way for me to get some exposure to things that I wouldn't just pick out on my own. And boy, did I pick the apex of not picking this on my own. What I'm listening to now is The Art of Dying Well by Saint Robert Bellarmine. And when I read the synopsis for it, I'm like, this is a classic book. Is this really a classic book? Is it really? So then I had to go look it up online, and then I realized that it was from the 1500s. This guy was what is it called? A Counter-Reformation figure in the Catholic Church, and he actually was involved in the Copernican Earth as the center of the universe, and how the Roman Catholic Church prohibited that sort of being put out into the world because it was counter to Christian doctrine and all that sort of stuff. But the synopsis for the audiobook assured me that this was a very profound and heartfelt and meaningful treatise on how to manage elegantly manage the process of death. Not something I wanted to listen to right now, especially considering some of the stuff I'm going through. Not me personally. I'm fine. It's just that I've been processing some grief and some loss, and I kind of don't need anything heavy like that. So on one level, when it turned out not to really be what the synopsis said it was, or at least the first half of it that I've listened to is not that, I was relieved. I was relieved it wasn't that. But what it is instead is an absolutely dry and didactic sermonizing lesson on how to be a good Christian, according to a Catholic from 400 plus years ago who thought that the earth was the center of the universe. I'm not a religious person, and I'm not really big into indulging religion just because it's very entrenched. To me, I just, I tend to not give organized religion the benefit of the doubt. And to me, this book was completely not a classic, because if it had transcended its subject matter and really gotten into how to be in the right mindset to accept the end part of one's life, then that would be great. And that's what was promised in the synopsis. But so far, for the first half of the book, he has been repeatedly going back to the well and saying, well, in order to die well, you have to live well, and this is how you live well. You don't be a sinner, and you practiced all these virtues, and we do all these very specific things that just coincidentally are the exact same things that the Roman Catholic Church was telling all of its subjects, because that's essentially what they were the correct things to do in order to be a good, pious Christian. So there's almost nothing in here that's of any use to me. And in fact, I just keep finding myself being very contrarian about everything that's being said here. The one thing that really made me stop the audiobook briefly and have an argument with the author, of course, obviously just talking to myself, but it was feels sort of like now. And I'm going to relay this, and I think that's the last thing I'm going to talk about for today. So he literally said in this book, that's supposed to be a classic of literature, that the reason that God fixed it up so that we don't know exactly when we're going to die is because he doesn't want it so we pull a fast one if we know we're going to die, and 3 months from now we're going to party it up for 2 months, and then we're like, it's about that time, let me get my life straight and get saved and become very pious, and so I'm all set and ready to go off to heaven when I die. And he said that God wouldn't want that to happen, and that's the rationale for why we don't know why we die, because we could pull a fast one on an almighty deity, and that deity wouldn't really know what our intentions were behind that. And for me, the reason why I dislike organized religions in general is because they come across as being way more interested in checking some random boxes that they decided were important to check, rather than actually evaluating intent, rather than actually evaluating inherent goodness. One of the last things that was mentioned in the book was fasting as a virtue. And he went on and on about how fasting does this and how fasting does that. And okay, that's great, but if the upshot of what you're saying is that fasting is an act which causes you to be a better person, couldn't you just use that energy just to be a better person? Could you use that energy just to help people? Maybe if you had a few more calories, you could go out and help a few more poor people out in the world, or maybe you could do your job that much more vigor and therefore do better work to make society better. But except we don't want to, again, another Catholic thing, we don't want to make society better because that's called loving the world, and God forbid that we love the world. I'm so disconnected from any and every concept that's being pushed in this audio book that I have. There's no point of connection here. The only possible way to salvage this is looking at it from an anthropological standpoint, or seeing it as a novel of some and I don't know if he was a monk or not. But anyway, at any rate, he was a cleric he was a church person. Seeing it as a first-person narrative novel or memoir from someone who's trying to speak from experience, trying to fictionalize what he's saying and see him as a character espousing a certain viewpoint. Because, we read novels about really bad people all the time, or people who aren't perfect, or people who have viewpoints which we don't agree with. And that's fine because we understand it's a work of fiction, or this is a character, and we're really just getting a character study here. So I'm kind of trying my very best to treat it as a character study, or a snapshot of how people thought at a certain point in time. But one thing it's not is a book on the art of dying well. It's absolutely not that. And I'm going to sit through the other 2 hours of it because I'm stubborn like that, and I don't want to not follow through on my plan just because I happen to disagree with the subject matter. So I'm going to try. I've got 2 hours and 21 minutes left. I'm going to try to get through that tomorrow, and I'll report back if there's any improvements in the content of the last half of the book. So that's all I have for now. I have a birthday dinner to go to tonight, so I'm not really sure how much extra stuff I'm going to get done, but I am happy that I sort of got back on track and I made my video. So that's episode 9. I think we're at 9. Are we at 9? If not, screw it. We'll get back on track and letting you know what episode it is tomorrow.